Sometimes the voice making your life decisions may not even be your voice. You, to use the term, wake up in the morning, you go through your routines, you react to people, make choices, but somewhere deep down, there's this strange feeling that you're watching someone else driving your life. Maybe you've caught yourself in the mirror wondering when you started looking so tired or so distant. I laugh just because it's so painful that I know that, you know that, we all know what it feels like to look at yourself and to be shocked and maybe get to the point where you're tired of lying to yourself that things are okay when they don't really feel that way. Or you feel so distant from who you thought you were. Well, that disconnection, noticing that is important. It may be divine. It's not random. And, this isn't just you. You're not alone. Some of the most brilliant minds in psychology and mystics and people who have spent decades studying this exact phenomenon, well, what they discovered I'd like to share with you today. And what they discovered will challenge everything that you may think that you know about being, to use the term, awake. Well, I'm Mark Roach. Welcome to Transcendent, my independent platform, and I mean independent, where I speak directly to people who want to tap into their authenticity, and if it resonates, find that unique spark that makes them whole. Well, we use this term, I'll be honest here. Well, my perspective isn't always comfortable. It's shaped by a circuitous journey that's covered continents, wild extremes, and the kind of learning that you just don't get from textbooks or watching movies. My own life has been an ongoing research project. I've learned from mystics, healers, built and left oil companies behind, stepped away from a path to the NFL. I've raised billions for startups. I've led thousands of professionals and had the privilege of getting guidance from figures well known in both business and athletics. I've been mentored by Hollywood coaches, artists, and directors. I'm a longtime student and practitioner in theater and film, with Meisner being my most notable pathway to that inner self that many of us may be trying to find and work from, your essence. So I'm a writer, I'm a journaler, I'm a filmmaker, producer, actor, and director. I've read and chronicled thousands of psychology textbooks and publications, and I've tested the theories in my reality, in my life, in my relationships. And what you might see are called experiments. But in reality, there are consequences to these actions that we take and to the trials and tests and the examinations that we make in our own life, the investigations that we make. So I guess most people will eventually step back and more importantly say, Mark's a mystic, a long-standing observer of life and the earth and of my fellow man. The goal here isn't, just to inspire you to be something that you may think that you want. It's really about easing the journey for anyone that's dealing with what you may see as trauma, or those that are searching for their artistic voice or their uniqueness, or dealing with some deep inner pain that they just can't quite get their hands around or their mind around, or find the words to describe or to connect with seemingly the right person or the right tribe to find more information, more comfort along this journey of uncovering who you really are and what that feeling is resonating with inside of you. Or you may be here to simply support someone else who tells you about a path like that, someone that you love or care about or need in your life. You know, this started for me and for many others in dealing with complex PTSD. PTSD, you know, the psychological term, post-traumatic stress disorder. But it really speaks to anyone human enough to face their own life, their own circumstances, their own failures, their own aspirations, their own pain. And sometimes pain that's obvious, sometimes pain that, you know, we bury, but is obviously something that's driving you, but, you know, that can stay hidden for a long time. We can get by managing our life and managing our relationships and minimizing consequences for a long time. The human resilience is incredible. And our ability to stuff this stuff down and not deal with it today, put it off till tomorrow, and deal with all the externalities in life may be occupying your attention today, but sometimes it stays hidden until suddenly, you know, that's all you can see. That chronic pain just leaps through the cracks and there's nothing else to deal with but that. And, you know, although this channel began as a resource for others with PTSD or complex PTSD, I've discovered that it's really for anyone, everyone, anyone who's human, who may face this pain or suffering at some point in life. So this may not be for you today. File it away. Come back and visit these videos at some future point in time when you really need them and whenever that pain is really seeking some resolution and pushing you to find some answers. Sometimes this pain is so obvious and unseen, and in the very end, what matters is the personal journey away from these outdated patterns that the pain may be driving and pointing you toward recognizing, toward a spirit that cannot be duplicated by artificial intelligence or subdued by force or dominance. Switched gears on you there, but sometimes there is a discovery through all of this pain for something more meaningful, more deeply powerful than dealing with the day-to-day survival issues that most of us are occupied with, and or the escape from those lack of resolution. And so we drink, we watch movies, we go to parties, we have superficial conversations, all in an effort to say everything's okay in the moment with each other, when actuality, you look around, you feel, you pause, you take some time to let yourself feel what's behind the scenes, let yourself get bored and really examine. And that's where you start looking for the real answers and to deal with some of the mysteries of mankind. So today I want to talk about 3 completely different systems of understanding human consciousness that actually discovered the same unsettling truth that I'm speaking about here and how we really function. One of those systems was human design. It was developed in the late 20th century by a guy named Alan Krakauer. He changed his name to Uru Hu in the middle of unfolding his teachings. And then there's the fourth way teachings of George Gurdjieff. He was an early 1900s mystic from Eastern Europe. And then there's Carl Jung, who you may have heard of. I believe he was a German analytical psychologist, and he was from roughly that same period. Interestingly, I mentioned Meisner earlier, and he studied with Stanislavski, who was also creating his pathway into helping theater artists get more realistic and true to themselves. And the Meisner method reaches into this. But these systems all emerged from completely different contexts, yet they arrived from remarkably similar conclusions about the nature of human existence and transformation. All three began with what Maurice Nicoll, who was someone who bridged Jungian psychology with Gurdjieff's fourth way, he calls this into stark recognition. So if you've followed my channel, I've got a lot of Nicoll's work that I speak from, because he characterized it so well in his groups that he was running in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in Europe. And as Nicoll put it, a man fully awake has no false personality. For those of us who are studying how to awaken, that means that the more awake we are, the less we are in this false personality. Or to put it another way around, the more a person is in false personality, the more that person is asleep. So this person isn't about being literally unconscious, but this is about living in what these teachers call unconscious automation, driven by conditioned patterns rather than authentic awareness. Nicoll went deeper into this understanding when he explained, we understand that false personality is composed of imagination, of false ideas about oneself. Some people think of false personality as being something blatant, loud, and boasting, but that's wrong. False personality in one person may sing, "What a fine person I am," and in another person sing, "Poor little me, the martyr." But the action on being is the same in both cases. They're denying who they really may be until they understand it, feel it, and allow it. So whether you're inflating yourself or deflating yourself, you may not be being yourself. So Gurdjieff was even more direct about this mechanical existence. He taught that a considerable percentage of people we meet on the street are people who are empty inside. That is, they're actually already dead. It's fortunate for us that we do not see and do not know it, because if we knew that a number of people are actually dead and what number of those dead people govern our lives, we'd go mad with horror, Gurdjieff said. And that sounds harsh, but Gurdjieff was pointing to something crucial about how we function and when we're not truly being present. He emphasized the mechanical nature of human reactions with this insight. You can never awaken using the same system that put you to sleep in the first place. Think about that for a moment. The very patterns, habits, and ways of thinking that created your current state of semi-consciousness can't be tools that you use to wake up. Carl Jung approached this same recognition through his concept of the persona and unconscious conditioning. Jung described a person as a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fitting enough of a kind of a mask designed on one hand to make a definite impression upon another's, and on the other hand to conceal the true nature of the individual. We all wear masks, but the problem comes when we forget we're wearing them and start believing the mask is who we really are. That's called identification. Well, Jung warned against identification with this false self. One cannot individuate as long as one is playing a role to oneself. The convictions one has about oneself are the most subtle form of persona and the most subtle obstacle against any true individuation. Individuation being Jung's word for self-discovery of finding deeper awareness of who you are. Even our private thoughts about ourselves can become another layer of false identity. So Uru Hu, founder of human design, described this conditioned state as the not self. He explained the moment you give up your authority, it is in the hands of others. and you're never complete. You can never trust in yourself, and then you end up in a life where you're not self-mind, rooted in your openness and conditioning is making decisions for you, taking you further and further away from who you really are. But Uru Hu also emphasized the transformative recognition possible through this understanding. The whole point of our work is to take the tendency of the shadow area and transform it into a positive wisdom that is genuinely productive. The goal isn't to eliminate the parts of yourself you don't like, but to understand them, use them, transform them into something useful. What's remarkable is how all three systems point to the same solution, moving from mental decision-making to body intelligence. This represents a striking alignment across all three systems, the consistent emphasis on bodily wisdom and inner authority over purely mental decision-making processes. Gurdjieff taught that the fundamental importance of grounding awareness in physical sensation. By grounding our awareness in the living sensation of our bodies, the I am, our real presence, can awaken. He described humans as three-brain beings with distinct centers that must work in harmony. We call them centers: the intellectual center, emotional center, moving center, and instinctive center. They're quite independent. Each center has its own memory, its own imagination, and its own will. Maurice Nicoll expanded on this understanding. Gurdjieff defines understanding as simultaneous intelligence of the body, the heart, and the mind. I don't believe what is usually called faith nowadays is understanding in the sense that Gurdjieff meant it. Real understanding, according to this view, isn't just mental comprehension, but involves your entire being. Jung approached this through his concept of connecting with the self, the transcendent function that emerges from integration of conscious and unconscious content, representing an authority beyond rational decision-making. As Jung put it, looking outwards has got to be turned into looking into oneself. Discovering yourself provides you with all that you are and that you were meant to be, and that all you are living from and for. Uru Hu was explicit about the importance of inner authority over mental decision-making. Human design offers a strategy and authority, an inner authority, not made up of one, not a philosophical one, but an authority that is part of your biological mechanism. It's your wiring, and it doesn't require your mind. This is revolutionary because most of us have been taught that the mind should make all of our decisions. Uru Hu emphasized the transformative power of trusting the inner authority. The moment you begin to experiment with your authority, you discover something quite remarkable. You're okay. You not only are you okay, but you can navigate your life. When you are your own authority, or you have access to this, your own authority process inside of you that you're born with, this is when self-love begins. Self-love isn't something you achieve through positive thinking or getting likes on Instagram. It's something that naturally emerges when you start living as yourself. Now, all three systems place conscious observation and self-witnessing at the center of their transformational methodologies. This isn't casual self-reflection. It's a specific practice with specific methods. Gurdjieff taught that observation itself becomes an instrument of change. Self-observation brings man to the realization of the necessity of self-change, and in observing himself, a man notices that self-observation itself brings about certain changes in his inner process. He begins to understand that self-observation is an instrument of self-change, a means of awakening. The act of watching yourself with genuine attention actually transforms what you're watching. He emphasized the need for impartial observation. During the observation of ourselves, if we do this correctly, thinking is shut down, beginning in flashes, but extended through practice. This isn't about analyzing yourself endlessly. It's about a quality of attention that's more direct than pure thinking. Maurice Nicoll described this practice in evocative terms. The object of self-observation is to let the light of consciousness into what lies in darkness within us. We're unconscious of all that lies in darkness in us. You can't change what you can't see. And most of what drives your behavior operates below the threshold of the ordinary awareness that most people have. Nicoll taught the importance of separation through observation. If he divides himself into an observing side and an observed side, that is, becomes two, then he begins to be able to shift his position, to change internally. Do you understand the depth of this idea? It is the way out of the prison of oneself. And when you can observe your patterns instead of just being caught in them, and then using them as your own self-justifying way of continuing on the path that you're perpetuating, you can create space for something new to emerge. Nicoll emphasizes the necessity of recognizing what is not I. A man cannot begin to change until he is able, as a result of self-observation, to say, that's not me. That is not I. As soon as he can begin to say this internally to himself, to something that he observes in himself, he begins to separate it from himself. And this is profound. Change begins when you can distinguish between what's authentically you and what's been programmed into you. Jung employed similar observational techniques through what he called active imagination and the observation of projections. Jung knew that until you make the unconscious conscious, you will direct your life, or that will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Most people think they're making conscious choices when they're actually being driven by unconscious patterns, and they experience this as bad luck or destiny. Well, human design's deconditioning process involves becoming aware of conditioning patterns, particularly through understanding how open centers take in and amplify external energy. Practitioners learn to observe their not-self themes as signals indicating when they're operating from conditioning rather than from authentic design. But here's where these teachings really get profound. None of them advocate eliminating the difficult or unwanted aspects of yourself. Instead, all three systems emphasize the integration of these rejected or unwanted aspects, or denied aspects, shadow aspects, rather than trying to eliminate them. The suppression of our feelings causes a lot of grief in our world. Acceptance is very important here. Jung was particularly clear about this principle. There is no light without shadow and no psychic wholeness without imperfection. You can't become whole by cutting out the parts of yourself that you don't like. And you just may be judging yourself based on things that have been handed you about how things should be. And when you learn to let that go and observe without judging, it's a powerful place to work from. Jung went further. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side in order to be whole. Because in this world, we have light and we have darkness. We can see because of the contrast between the two. Jung understood something that most people resist. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. That's maybe scary to you, but it may be even scarier to the institutions, to the church, to the tribe, to the community. because it lets you own your power. But he also knew that, or Jung also knew that wholeness comes through integration. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The goal isn't to become perfect or whatever that is, but to become real. And reality includes everything. Now, Gurdjieff distinguished between conscious and mechanical suffering, teaching that conscious engagement with difficulty can transform base energies into higher consciousness. Now, this isn't about seeking out pain just for pain's sake or to hurt yourself or to feel, but it's more about understanding that when difficulty comes, as it inevitably does, you can work with it consciously rather than just being victimized by it. That's reframing. It may be a gift, but you've been conditioned to see it as something to fear. Maurice Nicoll explained this principle in practical terms. We observe personality which has been formed by passing time by the action of life. We observe personality which has been formed in passing time by the actions of life. And that's kind of like your personality has been formed mindlessly. Just you're repeating these patterns. The work here is to make us cease identifying with what life has conditioned or created in us and is now creating the conditions that are doing to us. Life conditions you, but you don't have to remain unconsciously identified with that conditioning. Uru Hu taught that openness and conditioning are not problems to be eliminated. Openness is not bad or negative. The receptivity is an integral part of you. It's where you experience life, where experiences nourish you. Here is where you can learn, grow, and develop wisdom. Even the places where you've been conditioned can become sources of wisdom when you approach them consciously. Human design teaches that open centers, while the sources of conditioning, these open centers may be sources of conditioning in you, but they're also areas of wisdom and where learning can be achieved when approached correctly. The system encourages embracing the full spectrum of one's design center rather than to fix or change fundamental aspects. The fourth way distinguishes between conscious suffering and mechanical suffering, teaching that conscious engagement with difficulty can transform these base energies into higher consciousness. Alchemy. Rather than avoiding challenges, practitioners learn to use friction and resistance as fuel for development. Jung's individuation process requires embracing the shadow rather than rejecting it, recognizing that wholeness comes through integrating all aspects of the psyche. Jung emphasized that the goal is not to become perfect, but to become whole, incorporating both light and dark elements of the personality. The temporal framework for transformation is another area where these systems align remarkably. All three systems recognize that authentic transformation occurs over extended periods and cannot be rushed. Maurice Nicoll taught about the gradual nature of this work. The fourth way is based on understanding. The work of the fourth way is that you must understand yourself and why your negative emotions must go, and understand why self-justifying must go, why lying and deceit must go, why dominance and violence must go, and why internal considering and grievances and making internal accounts must go. Forgiveness. This isn't about following rules, especially not because someone told you. You have to discover this stuff for it to work inside of you. And it's about understanding deeply enough that you naturally and organically let go of what doesn't serve you. Jung described individuation as a lifelong process. The individuation process is a deepening and maturing of one's individuality and sense of authenticity. And he warned about the amount of time that it takes. In this time of descent, 1, 2, 3, 7 years, more or less, genuine courage and strength are required. Real transformation is measured in years, not weeks or months. Gurdjieff emphasized the need for sustained effort. Without struggle, no progress, and there'll be no result. Every breaking of habit produces a change in the machine. You're the machine if you're working from conditioning, acting robotically. This isn't about making life harder than it needs to be. It's about simply understanding that growth requires you to work against the momentum that's been established in your life by these patterns and conditioning and the robotics. Uru Hu specifically articulated human design's 7-year deconditioning cycle. For somebody who's truly and deeply into their experiment, you always point them toward the same thing. That is, you point them to their strategy and authority. These are the things that have to arise out of what is correct for you. Human design specifically articulates a 7-year deconditioning cycle based on the premise that it takes approximately this long for cellular renewal and for new patterns to become established at the biological level. The fourth way emphasizes gradual development through sustained effort. Recognizing that genuine transformation cannot be rushed, Gurdjieff spoke of the need for super efforts, deliberate, conscious actions that go against mechanical tendencies to build the strength for a need, or that's needed for real change. Maybe that's a cold shower, maybe it's fasting. It's a number of things that you can use to pivot out of the routines that conditioning puts on you. Jung's individuation is understood as a lifelong process with various developmental phases, often marked by significant life transitions and crises that provide opportunities for greater consciousness. Jung recognized that psychological development continues throughout life, with different archetypal energies becoming prominent at different stages. Ultimately, all three systems point toward the emergence of an authentic selfhood through the conscious integration of all aspects of your being. Jung described the goal of individuation as being the aim of individuation is nothing less than to divest the self of the false wrappings of the persona on one hand and the suggestive power of primordial images on the other. Maurice Nicoll taught that reaching essence beyond personality and remembering oneself does not remember the personality, but something prior to that lies in the direction of essence and can only be reached through it, a connection to the divine. There's something in you that existed before all this conditioning, before all the programming, and before all the roles you learned to play. Gurdjieff pointed toward the ultimate goal. The point is to reestablish what has been lost, not to acquire anything new. This is the purpose of development, Gurdjieff says. You're not trying to become someone else. You're trying to remember who you were before the world told you who you should be. Uru Hu expressed the beauty of this achievement. To be correct is to appreciate your own magic, your own beauty. So I continue to remind you to love yourself. When you're living as yourself, self-love isn't an effort or a practice. It's a natural recognition of your own uniqueness and value. The convergence of these three systems suggests that authentic psychological development involves several key elements: recognition of mechanical condition patterns, development of present moment awareness, integration of rejected aspects, and the cultivation of inner authority that transcends purely rational decision-making. The emphasis on body intelligence across all three approaches reflects a growing recognition in contemporary psychology and neuroscience that genuine wisdom incorporates somatic awareness, emotional intelligence, and intuitive knowing alongside rational thinking. These systems collectively point toward an evolutionary understanding of human consciousness and development. Human design's premise of humanity transitioning from 7 to 9-centered beings aligns with Gurdjieff teachings about the possibility of conscious evolution and Jung's vision of individuation as both personal and collective transformation. The integration of these approaches offers a comprehensive framework for understanding human psychological development that honors both individual uniqueness and universal principles of conscious evolution. Whether approaching this through human design's energetic mapping, the fourth way's methodical observation practices, or Jung's depth psychological insights, the essential movements remain consistent from unconscious, mechanized existence toward conscious, integrated, and authentic living. This alignment suggests that these seemingly different approaches are fundamentally described as the same process of human awakening from different angles or perspectives, each offering unique tools and viewpoints or perspectives or angles, while pointing toward the same essential transformation, the emergence of genuine consciousness in the authentic selfhood in place of conditioned mechanical, robotic, artificial intelligence-fueled existence. Now, contemporary practitioners can benefit from integrating insights from all these three systems. I even see Christianity as what Christ came here to share with us, aligned fully with these systems. But let's look at the human design charts to identify specific areas of conditioning that can be used to help you find your authentic expression. You can apply fourth way self-observation to witness these patterns in daily life with objective awareness. You can employ Jungian's shadow work techniques to integrate rejected or unconscious aspects of yourselves. You can use Meisner repetition, as I mentioned in my introduction, to discover many of these things about yourself. But you can follow human design strategy and authority as a practical decision-making tool for guidance. Practical fourth way self-remembering also helps you find routine activities to identify them, to stay present and aware. And you can utilize Jung's active imagination to dialogue with shadow material and unconscious content, much like you could use journaling. So all three of these systems provide specific frameworks for understanding and working with conditioning. Human design maps conditioning through the 9 centers with particular emphasis on how undefined open centers create vulnerability to external programming. That system provides detailed descriptions for not-self themes or self-betraying themes for each center, offering practitioners or you with specific indicators of when those centers are operating from conditioning versus when they may be operating openly with access to your essence. The fourth way categorizes conditioning through understanding of these differently defined centers and how they're being misused, teaching practitioners or you to observe when your intellectual or emotional or moving functions are operating outside of their proper domain. This system emphasizes learning to distinguish between genuine impulses and mechanical reactions. Jung's approach to conditioning involves recognizing projection. This is powerful. Identifying with personas and unconscious complex activation. His work focuses on understanding how early childhood experiences and cultural programming create unconscious patterns that continue to influence adult behavior. The alliance or alignment between these three systems suggests a universal recognition of different principles of human development that transcend specific cultural or historical context. Maurice Nicoll, who was uniquely positioned as a student of both Jung and fourth way teachers, represents a bridge between those approaches, and his work demonstrates how Jungian psychology Those insights can complement fourth way practices while maintaining the essential elements of both traditions. The relationship between human design centers and traditional chakra systems further illustrates how ancient energetic wisdom can be reformulated for contemporary understanding while maintaining essential principles about human energetic anatomy. These authentic voices from the traditions reveal a profound consensus about the nature of human development, whether approached through human design's energetic mapping, the fourth way's methodical observation practices, or Jung's depth psychological insights. The essential movement remains consistent from unconscious, mechanized existence toward conscious, integrated, and authentic living. The convergence of these teachings suggests that these seemingly different approaches are fundamentally describing the same process of human awakening from different angles, each offering unique tools and perspectives while pointing toward the same essential transformation, the emergence of genuine consciousness and authentic selfhood in place of conditioned mechanical existence. The most practical takeaway is this: you have an inner authority that knows what's correct for you. It's not your mind. It's not what others expect. It's not what society programs you to want. It's a body-based intelligence that emerges when you learn to observe yourself without judgment, integrating all these aspects of your being without rejection, and trusting the slow, patient process of authentic transformation. The secret, if there is one, is that you already have everything you need. Gurdjieff said that the point is to reestablish what's been lost, not to acquire anything new. And you're not broken, and you're not needing to be fixed. You're not incomplete, and you're not needing to be filled. You're conditioned and needing to be awakened. The prison isn't your circumstances, your past, or your limitations. The prison is living as someone you're not, while your authentic self waits patiently for recognition. These three wisdom traditions emerging from different times and places all discovered the same key to that prison. The question is whether you're ready to use it. I'm Mark Roach. This is Transcendent, wishing you all the best.